This meeting is being recorded.
Okay, good afternoon. Today is December 7th, 2022. It is 4:31 p.m. and the meeting of the KIPP Texas Executive Committee is now called to order. I'm Gene Austin, Chairman of the KIPP Texas Board of Directors, and I'm presiding in person over this meeting at Austin Ridge campus in Austin, Texas. Committee members present today by video conference are, and I would like you to acknowledge when I say your name, Pepe Guevara.
Here.
Gretchen Miller.
Here.
Allison Thacker. Okay, Kent Wallace.
Here.
Darla Whitaker.
Here.
Okay, thank you very much. For record, a quorum is present. I'd also like to welcome the KIPP Texas staff that are here by video conference. Seba Ali, CEO, and Scott, Chief Advancement Officer, Sun Han, CFO, and Cicely Taylor, Chief of Staff. Additionally, Ellen Spalding, our outside legal counsel, is joining by video conference. First order of the executive committee is to approve the minutes from the November meeting, which were sent to you. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
And a second, I heard. All in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you. Okay, with that, the time is now 4:32, and we will now adjourn to executive session pursuant to Texas Government Code 551.071, consultation with board attorney regarding all matters as authorized by law, Texas Government Code 551.074, deliberation regarding appointment, employment, evaluation, reassignment, duties, dismissal of employees, officers, including the executive team and board members. And Texas Government Code 551.072, deliberate the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property. And finally, 551.071, legal issues. We'll return to this Zoom link at the conclusion of executive committee. Please turn off the recording.
Not the host. Oh, there we go.
Okay, everybody, welcome back. It's now 5:07 p.m. and we are back in open session. The next item on our agenda is to review the board meeting scheduled for January 18th in Austin. And I'll turn it over to, I think, Seba or whomever, somebody.
Yeah, well, Cicely, do you want to frame?
Sure. I'll start before I even go into the agenda. I just want to frame some pivots that we're making after having some conversations with board members as well as our senior leadership team as to how we can adjust our meetings to really leverage the professional expertise of our board members to help us tackle some of our most challenging topics, as well as ensure that you all have the updates and information that you need to know in order to ensure that our organization is healthy, both financially, academically, socially, et cetera. So in thinking about that, some of the things that we were asked to consider as we go into planning for this meeting is it's too many things. We have very, very heavy update, sit and get information loaded meetings oftentimes. What we're hearing is that a lot of this we read in the board deck. We appreciate the updates, but this doesn't allow opportunity for board members to really like lean in and help us with the most pressing issues that we have. And that's what we're hearing board members want to do. So what we're looking at doing the next time around is limiting those updates, making sure you all know where we're sitting in terms of our organizational health with our power metrics and our board scorecard, and then doing a deep dive on one particular topic that is relevant for the scope and sequence of the year and the season of the year, which in this case will be our mid-year academic performance report, where we will include information on our subpopulations, which is what was asked. Example, letting you all know, like, along with that overall academic overview of where we are mid-year, how are our SPED students doing? How are our English language learner students doing, et cetera? Along with that, providing smaller topics for consultancy and debate and discussion. And those topics would be centered around, as you all heard, our challenge with persistence. I know leaving the meeting, some of our board members asked, hey, we can help you with this. This is actually a business issue. Maybe you're not looking at the right data, or maybe you're not looking at the right cut of data. And this is something we'd really like to help support you in it, because it's a tough nut to crack. And as you know, attendance and persistence is an issue that's just not unique to us, but unique to just education in general. And we really want to leverage our board to help us support us in that, as well as our social emotional learning data around how can we develop partnerships to support our initiatives around access to medical care, as well as access to situations where our students are in food deserts, to food access. So those are more of the consultancy that we're going to engage in with our board. Our deep dive will be academic performance. And then of course, we'll have our compliance things, which are centered around, obviously we always do a finance update, so you know where we are doing financially, as well as we have a compliance report that we need to do centered around the TAPER report, which is the Texas Academic Performance Report, which we're required as schools to do at this time every year. So that's really high level, some of the pivots that we want to do to make our meetings more engaging, more discussion oriented, less sit and get, and really leverage the expertise and the brains in the space. I'm going to pause there for feedback.
I mean, I definitely am favorably disposed to a less topics, more time on a topic, except for the obvious kind of quick updates. So.
And we did sort of a kind of test run with our regional board meeting today, where we really just, what are the high level things? What are the updates we want to make sure they got? A lot of it was already in the deck in the pre-read. And we ended up having just a great conversation on our KIPP Forward program, which was the deep dive. We had a great conversation on the planning for the annual dinner, which our regional board in Houston is really heavily engaged with. And it just, and we got great information and feedback from our board there. So I think we're moving in the right direction, but as always, after every meeting, we do an after action review and we tweak it and see what we can do better, but that's what we want to do.
So sounds like you guys don't have an actual draft agenda.
Oh, I do. I just want, I'm just framing.
Okay.
Framing.
Let's go through the draft.
Once
agenda.
bitten, twice shy.
Hey, okay, I learned. I listened, I learned.
Let's go ahead and go through the
Thank you,
draft
Eric.
agenda as an example of what you're thinking.
Yeah, let's do that. Okay, give me 1 minute here and I'll share my screen. That was the framing. Okay.
And Allison, as we're pulling up the screen, Allison was the pinch hitter this morning and led our Houston Regional Board meeting because our board chair was sick. So Allison also would just love you to share any reflections you have from how the agenda didn't feel different enough, or how it did, and how it sat with kind of you as a member of that board.
Well, at least for that board, narrowing the focus down allowed us to activate the board members and have more discussion and have, I think, get better kind of commitment out of the regional board members. I worry with the fiduciary board, maybe there's a lot of information we have to know. So I don't know how we do that, Cicely, with the Texas board. But I did think it was very engaging, and we did deliberately, Seba had told me she really wanted to have conversation. And so we got that. But we had to do a lot of signposting to people like, okay, we really mean it.
Well, I think you're absolutely right, Allison. With this board, because of the nature of the board and the responsibilities, there is that balance because you all are responsible for a lot. So that's what we're trying to achieve. So I'm going to walk you through, and if you all don't think that we've quite achieved that balance, just let us know and we can figure out how we need to adjust. So, starting out with our mission moment and our public comment, the CEO report, which has been historically the 60 to 90 minute, really heavy updates from every single chief, kitchen sink sort of approach. We are retooling this. We want to make sure you understand where we are landing with regards to our scorecard, our metrics, Those are our metrics of health. How are we doing, with our attendance? Are we tracking off track, on track? How are we doing with academic performance? Are we on track, off track, et cetera? And then there is where Seba, if there's something that she needs to flag with regards to those metrics, and I'm sure you will flag for us as well, but she'll be prepared to flag anything that's unusual and give you an update on that, and also let you know what we're focusing on for the next period of time.
So
From
what happens if something's off track?
then that's what we'll have to definitely discuss it. That would be a conversation.
Well, no, on any of these metrics, so I'm just saying, if a 20-minute session, you're gonna have couple of things that probably aren't where you want them to be, right?
Mhm.
That's my point, is that how do we get
Allow for time.
enough of an update that we feel like, okay, there's a plan to address it, here's the plan, here we go.
Yeah.
I think-
Or you could
Yeah.
have it in one of the sessions coming up after the CEO report, or address it inside the report.
Yeah, I think what we're hoping to do is make that a deep dive topic
Mhm.
later in the agenda. So, I mean, there should be, as a staff, no surprises to us on where we're off track, right? We can tell you now where we're off track.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
tell me if this, let's see if, as we go through, Cicely reviews the
Mhm.
agenda, if this feels like it works. Like, we know we're off track in attendance and persistence, and so we made that a deep dive topic.
Okay,
For example, we know that we have a lot of work to do on math, and so we're giving you a pretty detailed academic performance report, and that makes sense because it's mid-year. Right? So those are some of the ways that we're thinking about it, but we're trying to even make those conversations more discussion oriented and less like the staff reporting out the data and what we're doing to mitigate. We're thinking more of a problem solving session. So kind of noodle on that as we're thinking through this, as we're walking through this agenda, and tell us, like, it's totally fine to say, hey, y'all, you do need to stick with more reporting. This isn't going to work, but we're just trying to try something different to get the boards. I think what we heard from the board is people want to be engaged in the problem solving and the figuring out how to get better for things that are really important to us. And so this is our attempt at that.
but I think what you've got to think, I mean, remember, you have a very large board.
Yeah.
Right? And people from very diverse backgrounds.
Yeah.
So you've got to be happy with kind of the feedback you just got on the growth discussion.
Mhm.
A little more of
Agreed.
this, a little less of this, a little bit of that, a little of that, and then take that and then kind of work with it, because the board is going to be hard to. Asking a board to be a problem solver is not usually a good use of time. Because we don't have enough data. We're going to give you ideas, we're going to give you thoughts. Maybe a couple people on the board hey, they understand, the topic better than others. You might get that, but you just have to be careful about what your expectations are.
Yeah.
Awfully big group from a wide variety of backgrounds.
Yeah, and what I totally agree, and I know Gene obviously said, and there's been many board meetings where you were the CEO, but the best board meetings we have are where the management team comes in. Here's the problem. Here's the different options we considered. Here's the one we chose, and
Right.
then the board debates. If the board doesn't agree with that or wants to go a different option, then
Yeah.
that's great. But we expect the management team to have analyzed all the issues and come up with what they believe is the right path. And our job is just to assess.
Our job is to say, interesting proposal. Have you thought about this? Or did you get enough data on this, or what have you, to make your recommendation even more full, right?
I think asking those clarifying questions is what we're looking for.
Okay.
For example, when we were talking about persistence, and Peter asked a great question about the numbers on whether or not they were gross or they were net. And I think that's something that in the space of that time, that's not something that was considered, and it was something that Vanessa went back to look at. And he also suggested that maybe we're looking at our data in the right way. So, I'm sure her team is now looking at their data and figuring out what are some other additional cuts that we need to be looking at as we try to figure out this persistence nut to crack.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
If you're looking for clarifying questions and you know, a little bit of feedback and all that, I think that's a good use.
So then I would add also one thing that I heard is that we need to be really clear in each section of the board agenda, what it is that we want from our board members. So for example, if this is just a compliance report, well, we just need to share this with you. It's not really, you know, a topic for like serious discussions. It's something the state says we need to do, then let the board know that. If this is a conversation where we really want you to poke holes in this and ask some clarifying questions, you know, be really clear about that. Is this just an update? So that's a direction that we'll be giving to our presenters as well as, you know, it's on the agenda. We try and make it clear what it is, the purpose of that particular topic in that time as well. So you know what's expected of you or needed of you. So CEO report, then we will have our mid-year academic performance reports. We'll have a good amount of time for that, followed up by a compliance piece, which is the public hearing for the Texas Academic Performance Report. Then we will go into, there are two things we really wanted to have a little bit more in-depth discussion with you and ask the board to ask some clarifying questions and possibly for the social emotional piece, germinate some ideas. And I'll walk you through that. For the KIPP Texas social emotional data analysis and action planning, what we want to do is present to you the panorama data, which is our social emotional learning survey that really highlighted the needs of our students. And from there were three specific needs that we felt had the greatest needs that we wanted to address for our students, which centered around access to food, it centered around access to medical care, and it also centered around brave and belonging spaces, ensuring that our students felt safe in their schools. A challenge that, and Anne, you can speak into this, that we are currently experiencing in trying to find partners to address particularly medical access and food access within our 4 regions. Ideally, we'd like to have 4 anchor partners within our regions to help provide that. For example, we have, I'm blanking on the name, Legacy Health to provide medical care in Houston, but we don't necessarily have that sort of partnership in some of our other regions. And so, you know, kind of coming to the board and germinating, you know, given the regions that you're in, you know, who should we be talking to? Who do you think we need to reach out to possibly develop friendships or partnerships with to provide that kind of care for our students? The attendance and persistence discussion is where we would like for Vanessa's team to come in and present the work that they're doing, how they're now looking at it differently, or what they are strategizing given the last conversation we had, the last board meeting, and then asking the board to then step in and ask some clarifying questions around the direction that we're going with persistence. And then we will have our finance update from Sun. And then we will go into that multi-year plan conversation that we just had in closed session. I am not sure, Ellen and I are trying to figure out where exactly that conversation should be, whether or not an open and closed, depending on what information is being shared. From there, we will have another compliance report, and we will probably have the intruder audit findings as a compliant piece at all of our meetings for the rest of the year, as they have to visit all of our schools. So whenever there is any kind of finding, we need to report that to the board. And part of that will be an open session, part of it will be in closed session, depending on what the findings are.
What's the timeline that we have to report to the board? 30 days? You know,
I
Ellen?
don't know if it's 30 or 60 days.
It's 45 business days.
Okay.
So a lot of districts have just made it part of their regular board meeting,
Yeah.
so that it's really just a 2-minute to 5-minute, here's what we're reporting this time.
Yeah.
Then we will adjourn for executive session, where if needed, we'll have additional information on the audit findings, any facility or procurement updates, governance updates. We'll be talking about recruitment. And in January, we always talk about succession planning. And then we'll have our consent agenda and regional board liaison report. That will be our agenda.
Hey, Cicely, are we doing an advocacy report at all?
I did not have it in here, but if that's something that we need to do, I can do that.
I would think yes.
Mhm.
Probably during
was
executive
missed.
session.
So one of Deidre's topics at the last meeting that was a little challenging was the Was it
ESL?
English as,
Is that
English as
popular? Yeah.
second
ESL,
language?
yeah.
We are going to come back.
We're
in-
way not looking good there in my recollection. Is that part of this? Because I remember I asked for continuous update here.
That'll be part of our mid-year academic performance report. Like a lot of you all said, hey, we haven't really seen this data before, or it's been a long time. So we're going to make sure that you all get continuous updates on what we're doing about that and where our students are landing, not just overall, but in those various subpopulations. So our English emerging bilingual students, our SPED students, all of the categories that we consider subpopulations.
So let me throw a bit of a wrench here. In managing these very large board groups, it's very difficult to have strong, substantial discussions on details, just like on this ESL thing. Is it worthwhile having some committees? I know we're asking a lot of people on this about it, but it's a difficult, deep subject that I recognize might not be able to be simplified and brought down to everybody's understanding immediately. Is that a resource that we could use, or do we want to have a conversation and have a committee come represent? I don't know.
I think it's
Go ahead.
I think it's
Sorry,
worth
Gene. Lack of clarity.
investigating. I think it's worth investigating. I was kind of wanting to see what the update looked like at this meeting before we said, hey, this needs more attention.
Good.
Mm.
Okay.
And I think a special committee is fine if we can, if we think that's the right step, but.
Yeah, maybe not. And then again, the committee might not be of all board members, because
No,
I recognize that I'm not an educator. I'm useless in that committee. But people who might be friends of the board who join us. I don't know, Allison, what's your thought there?
Or maybe an opportunity to learn more.
Yeah.
Following this board meeting,
Old dog, hard to teach new tricks.
One thing, different thing, just your initial framing, Cicely, about people gave input and they want to provide help and all. I would just be careful personally to create agenda items to meet the need of a board member wanting to give help. And I get it, and I think that's helpful and that people want to. But you even said, well, we want to be sure that it's clear what that agenda item is. If the agenda item is to provide information, we want to say so. You have two agenda items that say something like brainstorming problem solving consultancy. When I see that, I'm like, ooh, roll up my sleeves. We are here to help. And I don't know if that's really what you really want. Is where you ended up with, we had this one question to want to know if somebody has resources in the region. And so I would just be careful, because I think those words might bring, at least it did for me, brought to mind a very different type of discussion than when you walked through what you would envision it to look like.
Thank
good
you.
feedback.
Yeah, that is.
Board members can be very overly helpful. It can happen easily.
Who
Oh, it could happen. It could happen, trust me.
are you calling overly helpful?
But I do think working groups are where that belongs,
Mhm.
right? I think that's the right thing, but we can have questions and dialogue, especially with senior management, about their areas of expertise. And there's nothing wrong with asking Vanessa those questions and then her going back and cutting the data two different ways, and then us talking about it at the next meeting. I would see that as positive governance
Yeah.
from a board perspective. And we want to have enough time for that. And so I do think that maybe is a question of like, what can be delivered to the board in a way where they can understand it and read it in advance and not have to have it presented in the meeting. I don't know what the rules are, Ellen. So like, stop me
You
when I'm
can-
going off.
Yeah. No, you can present to them anything you want to in advance. You can give board members anything you want to read in advance. The only rule is that if a quorum of the board is going to discuss it, they must do it at a properly called meeting.
And the topics have to be published
Right, exactly.
72 hours.
And I think on the work group piece, what I would just say is I just think we need to be careful about anything we stand up really having a role and a clear charter that's helpful to the staff, because otherwise we just end up creating busy work. And like we've stood down several committees for that reason. And I just don't want to repeat that.
Absolutely.
Sorry, not committees, work groups. I know it's not a committee. Thank you, Cicely.
So what I'm walking away with is, yes, for questions and dialogue and allowing time for that and making sure we're being very specific about what we want from that. At the same time, I guess maybe narrowing the scope in terms of like when we want those opportunities and making sure board members know really what's expected of them as we think about the agenda and the topics.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
go ahead, Jean. No, finish your thought because I was going to ask a new question.
Yeah, and as the leadership folks walk through their topics, to Kent's point, they have recommendations. This is the path we're going to take, and let the board react to that.
Deb, are you going to ask a question?
So how do you all feel looking through this agenda about cutting down we cut down the CEO update pretty significantly to have those, to instead focus on those deep dives. So how does that, now that you've been through the agenda, how is that sitting with you? Is that the right thing to do? Or should we bring back the full CEO update with all the chiefs presenting?
I like it. I'm not sure you're going to get it done in 20 minutes, but I like it like in 30 minutes. And the CEO update that I would usually start my board meetings with is quickly 3 things that I think have gone really well since I last saw you, and 3 things that I'm concerned about. And those 3 things I'm concerned about usually are discussed in depth in the rest of the board meeting. And then a scorecard, right? Just want to give you guys an idea of the scorecard, how we look and all those types of things.
Yep.
That's helpful.
And it's, your report is also the prelude to the rest of the day, really.
Yep.
Cicely, I wonder if it would be helpful to put all the compliance agenda items together. We've got 2 at the top and 1 at the bottom. You sort of have to shift your brain from I'm just listening to a report to I'm giving more in-depth feedback, and then back to I'm just listening to a report. I feel like if we just knocked out the compliance items at the top of the meeting, people know that I'm going to sit and get a little bit, and then we're going to get into the meat.
Fabulous point. Even if it doesn't flow naturally through our value chain or through our I think it's a fabulous point.
Thank you for saying that, Pep. I was like, ooh, okay.
Fabulous.
Thank you for naming that.
I strongly agree.
And the right word is
yes.
not value chain. I have no clue what our value chain is, but
And I know you were thinking about flow, Cicely.
I know. Okay.
Anything on this agenda that is missing or that you think doesn't need to be there? Cicely, can you pull it up again so everyone can look at it?
Well, I know Deirdre is filling a really important position for you, but she's filling a really important position for you on an interim basis. It's just a question. Does it make sense to have her cover that large of a piece of your agenda, or I don't know what the alternative would be though.
Well, the alternative would be to divide it amongst members of her team. Which we could do too. I mean, they're all
Like, is there maybe one, the one where you want to talk about the data analysis around socio-emotional challenges, or one of the other ones?
Well, what may happen, so we can talk about this, is because she does have 2, there are 2 of our team members that are specifically working with the SEL data and action planning around that, being that they are the kind of the content experts for that. she may
Mhm.
have them come in, or I know they definitely are helping to support that report.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Also,
actually,
you just, I'm trying to understand what you're getting at.
I think Allison's saying Deidre has a large voice for someone who's interim in the role and is retiring.
Yep.
So
It's an hour and a half in the meeting straight, it's a long time to have one voice. It just depends on if you want to have other voices, have the board have exposure to the experts. It went really well when you
Yeah.
did that 2 meetings
point.
ago, and we got to see the depth of the subject matter expertise at a layer down in the organization. I thought that was great. So I thought maybe one of the 3 topics that might be an opportunity.
Okay.
But
That's fair.
I'm happy to have that not be the case. It just was a question.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good push. And I think the academic update actually is a really good place to bring in other voices. The voice that it really leads this academic assessment work is Carrie, and she's on maternity leave. However, she is a great deputy, and that could be fantastic exposure for this person who's never gone in front of the board before. So I like going a little deeper there in terms of staff and having more voices. I actually think it gets Deidre off the hook a little bit for knowing all the nuances of the data that aren't really, her expertise. So let's do that. The deep dive on the socio-emotional work, that is actually Deidre's core work. So we'll maybe let her lead that with Dr. Rivera and Issy, who are co-conspirators in that work. But we'll figure it out, but I definitely hear you. And then I also think for one thing that's missing is in the executive session, we should add a 15-minute hiring update, because I'm hiring a lot of positions right now. And so I think it would be helpful to add that. Is there anything else that you all found was either doesn't need to be there or is missing?
What did we say was missing earlier?
Advocacy?
The
Advocacy.
advocacy, right?
One of the things, so do we have 4 meetings a year, or how many do we have a year?
We have 4
Okay.
meetings plus the all boards meeting.
Perfect. One of the things I do, I'm not sure if it's relevant or applicable here, is in the start of the year, I publish a calendar for all of the meetings so that people know what to expect, and it's easier for us to determine what's missing from a particular board agenda. There's obviously every time there's emerging topics, but like this time we were missing advocacy. If we had a calendar for which of these board meetings is it the first, second, third, and fourth, do we discuss advocacy? It would be much easier for us to know what's missing.
We can provide, we have a scope and sequence of historically the topics that we've covered, particularly when it comes to compliance.
Yeah, compliance is easy.
That we can share with you. And then there's always like nuance as we go through the year. Things rise up to the top that we need to add. But we can provide something like that.
And I don't need it. I don't think the board needs it. It's just for you guys to answer the question, what are we missing? I mean, there'll be some emergent topics where we can help, but then there's the blocking and tackling that I assume that's how it's done.
Yeah. I think it's a good layout. And I like the format change. I think the one thing you could do is take the finance report and put it in the CEO report. Still have Sun do it, put it there. So you kind of have Seba's update, precursor, financial health check, and then topics that the board needs to be engaged on. They're, topics of the day, if you will.
I'll stop sharing.
Anything else, exec committee?
Well, I appreciate the feedback. You all provided some really great feedback as we think about the adjustments we're making. So I appreciate all of it. Thank you.
Good stuff. Thank you all very much. Okay, so the time is now 5:40 PM and we will adjourn the executive session. You can turn off the recording.